interview,
Good.
I called Mel Lewis a couple of days ago, and
yeah, good.
have you talked? So I said, because I was reading, I looked up, I pulled out all the records that I had with you on it, and then I went to the Encyclopedia Jazz, and they had a few things written about you.
Yeah, right. Well, they have the latest one that they haven't put. Leonard Feather hasn't put. I don't think he's put out anymore since he's got the one in the 70s.
Right.
Is that the one you got your information?
I have two. I have one. The 60s
there's one in the 60s, 70s. Yeah, well, I think there's some information. I'm in both of them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I was just saying that the 71 is a little more up to date. Up to date. Yeah, it's up to date.
Okay.
More or less. What I'm saying is that the one in the 60s, that's when I was with the Maynard band, and well, I guess they mentioned that too. But I was just saying, I was wondering whether you had the latest one, because he hasn't put out any more. He hasn't. Leonard Feather has. I mean, one of the 80s hasn't been released yet.
No.
So I guess you got both of them.
Got both of them.
Yeah.
So, and I was trying to look for. Do you remember an old interview in Downbeat? It was called "Our Drummer's Paranoid." Do you remember that? You were in that a little bit.
Yeah, I was in. That's right. It was a drummer's paranoid.
Our drummer's paranoid.
Right.
So.
That's true. It was in there by the trombone player who used to work with us, Mike Swearing.
Right.
He's a drummer, because he was with the Maynard Ferguson band, and then he started to write for the Village Voice, and then he wrote. Then he started to he was a contributing editor there for Downbeat. That was the time
Have you ever had an interview before at all? I haven't found one, but like for Downbeat or anything.
Oh yeah.
Good.
Right. Yeah. Sure. I've had one for Downbeat. That was the one that. It was Ira Gittler.
Gittler did it. Okay.
Yeah, Ira Gittler. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good writer, that guy.
Yeah,
well, Mel suggested starting off, he said, talking about Buffalo, because he said you had a lot of great bands in Buffalo and played with a lot of great bands in Buffalo.
Yeah,
so
in Buffalo.
We could just start there.
Right, yeah, in Buffalo. Yeah, well, I started with Georgie Clark.
Right, that's who he mentioned.
Yeah, he mentioned Georgie.
Yeah.
Well, Mel and I, we both, I know you realize the fact that we're both from Buffalo, but Mel and I were about the same age, and we came up around the same time, and we both played with George Clark. He played with George Clark also, but at the time that he played with George Clark, that was mainly him taking my place. You see, what it was, Mel and I would come down to New York City, and I had this steady job there, and we would exchange it. Anytime I wanted to come to New York, get away from Buffalo, or to come down to New York and see what was happening, and trying to get myself introduced to the guys around, especially guys that I looked up to, that I was influenced by, and like Max Roach, and who was at that time, it had the style, him and Kenny Clark with the bebop style, and Ed Shaughnessy with the two bass drums.
Yeah.
All those, he was with Charlie Ventura. All that was happening in New York. So I would take off, and Mel would take my place in the band. It was George Clark's band.
What was it, the late 40s you're talking about now?
Well, right. It was right around 46, 40, right, late 40s.
Okay.
And I was influenced, as by Max. Well, I mean, to go back even before that, I was really, in my early age, influenced with Gene Krupa, because I used to skip school, go up and catch a Gene Krupa band. When he'd come in, I'd go ahead and take a pencil and darken my mustache, try to look older.
Really?
Skip school and go. And the lady, I know she knew that I wasn't, aged. I think the man upstairs was just good to me, because she had to know that, I was a kid.
Yeah.
And what she really was supposed to do was not let me come into the theater, but she must have seen that anxiety,
right,
and that I had in my eyes that I wanted. She must have felt inside of her, this kid really wants to hear this music, because she never, every time that band would come in, not only Gene Krupa, well, Cab would come through, and all the big bands, Lucky Millinder would come through, and that's the time when the Billy Eckstein, was going strong. But like I say, I would go into that theater, and I must have had that, that look in my eye that I wanted, lady, don't
Please.
turn me away,
Yeah.
And I go in, and on the Gene Krupa shows, especially, I'd skip school and I would stay all day.
How many sets would they do?
Well, what it was, they would do about 4 shows a day.
Wow.
See? And the thing is that, how I would do, I'd get there, I'd catch, that first show would go on, I think at that time around 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
And what I'd do after the show was over, I would go into the ladies' bathroom because the ushers would never look there. See, they're supposed to clean out the theater, and then the new people come in,
right?
With the new admission.
Yeah.
But they would always go and knock, and maybe look and say, "All clear," until they're telling them that the show's or whatever, and I'd be in the ladies' bathroom, I'd be back in there, like underneath, the door there. And the ushers would, they would come. It's all right. So that meant that it's okay. They'd open the doors.
Yeah.
New people come in, and I'd come out the bathroom, go catch another show.
Yeah.
I'd do that sometimes right up till 12 o'clock, catch all 4 shows. That's how,
And were they different? Did they put like different sets, or did they just repeat the same show?
Well, basically it was the same, format. Oh,
Yeah.
sometimes they would, change a few tunes, but that's, that was my early, my early love, music, the big bands. I was,
sure.
I was into the big band scene. So getting back to, your question, in regards to, where I played and, starting out. I played with George Clark around there. I played with all the bands, all the bands that were, like working,
right.
constantly. George Clark was the main orchestra that I would say got me started.
That was a big band.
That was well, no, you know what? It wasn't a big band. He had a quartet, but what I would do, I would go up to the local. And in fact, Mel Lewis and I both would go to the Union, and we would keep our chops up, by working, with a local band, which we call like it was a rehearsal band. At first, it turned out to be a rehearsal band, and that rehearsal band at that time was Lenny Lewis, but it turned out to be a very good band, and Mel Lewis went with that band. He, that was one of Mel Lewis's first experiences on the road, was with the Mel Lewis. He played. Not Lenny Lewis.
Yeah.
He played with the Lenny Lewis Orchestra, and then Lenny Lewis Orchestra. Then he went with Ray. I think he played with Ray Anthony and a few others. He played. I think Alvino Ray. Then he went with Stan Kenton.
Right.
But and Mel had more big band experience, than I did. He had the chance to get out on the road,
right?
With the big band. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And my big band experience, came later. In fact, more of it came here when I moved to New York. When I come to New York, I had some experience there, working with a couple more, like they say, local rehearsal bands at the Union that I would go up to. But my first big band experience came forth when I joined Maynard Ferguson. See, that's where I got my my biggest exposure.
Right.
The largest amount of exposure came from Maynard Ferguson. Okay. When I joined his, and that was around like 1960, 59, 60,
right.
61.
Right. So were you studying when were you studying too in Buffalo?
Yeah, I was studying with, and I studied with Johnny Rowland. In fact, he still is he's the percussionist there with the Buffalo Symphony. He's been there about 50 to 60 years, and it's got to be
80s or something.
He's got to be his age. He's got to be about 75, between 75 and 80 years old.
Wow.
See, when I left Buffalo and moved to New York, he had been with the symphony 40 years then, 30 to 40 years. So you can imagine, I've been here 25 years, or going on 30, so he's got to be 70. He's a very good instructor. He's, he would take a youngster, underneath his wings, and thing is, he didn't have to do this too. I mean, let's face it, he's there on a steady salary. It wasn't finances with him. It's just that this man just had that, he had that love in his heart, and also a will to do and to share, his knowledge, for a small amount of money. He never charged an enormous amount of money to drummers. He knew drummers starting out, they weren't making that money. Well, my God, his salary, surpassed any kind of money that the drummers, the youngsters that he was teaching. But he was he was a very good teacher. Yeah. And even though he was he was regarded as a percussionist with the Buffalo Symphony, which, as you know, it's dealing with symphonic music and classics. Yeah. He knew just what to teach a new drummer coming up to get his dynamics, his jazz, whatever he wanted to play. If he wanted to, because even with me, I heard all these guys starting that stuff when I was in Buffalo, starting that off the beat, this coordination. These guys, Ed Shaughnessy, Max Roach, they were doing this coordination. Well, Ed Shaughnessy was doing it off the two bass drums. Right. All that boom, 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 and then also Charlie Persip, because I'd see him when he had two bass drums when he first started with Dizzy, not the big band. Dizzy had a sextet. Yeah. And Charlie Persip, they got him out of it. He's from Newark, New Jersey, and he had just joined Dizzy's band, and the sextet had Joe Carroll, and I used to see him do the same thing. Him and Ed Shaughnessy both with the two bass drums, and I used to look and I used to say, Jesus Christ, how these cats? How can that be? How can you do that? How can you play that boom 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 boom, and then keep your da 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 boom ba 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 da 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 boom, and and even with like Max Roach, I see him playing in keeping boom boom. I'm saying, how can a drummer keep that beat going with his right hand, and then play all this off like that was a change. It was the changeover coming into the bop era. Bop era, sure. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what excited me more so, because I was growing right up into that. In other words, that was I at my age, that was the turn of the style for in my age bracket.
Was Krupa still playing at the time you were watching him more on the drums themselves?
Krupa was playing Krupa never really changed his basic style, which was more or less a swing style, which is in the line of Lionel Hampton. That's those two drummers. In fact, Lionel and Krupa's far. I'm not saying that Lionel was ever the soloist, that Krupa was, but I mean, in that style, that swing era. Yeah. And no, he stayed basically the same way. He played right up to the time he died, Gene Krupa. Yeah. And I admired him. I admired Gene Krupa for two reasons. And then after I got to meet him, after I met him, I admired him more because of the fact that I had, looked up to him as a youngster. He inspired me. I skipped school to go see him. And when I came to New York and was playing with Maynard's band, we played a couple gigs out there, and I think it was in Great Neck, Long Island. I'm pretty sure it was out there.
and Gene Krupa was on the bill. It was Maynard's band, Gene Krupa, and so Maynard's band played 2 or 3 numbers, and Gene Krupa, he was there behind the curtain there, and he was watching me.
Wow.
Of course, I wasn't aware of it, And after the set was over, he said, to Maynard, he says, "Hey, your drummer, does he like slinging drums?" And I'm going to tell you, I had just come to New York.
Right.
And although, I had worked, with several little small bands, you know what I mean, but I hadn't, worked with any large bands, and that was a challenge.
Yeah.
Maynard's band was a challenge. And Gene Krupa had said to me, he said, "Hey, I like your drummer there," and he says, "Hey, how about, telling him about slinging drums? Does he like slinging drums?"
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you, at that time, any drum set would have, because look, I came to New York, and I'm going to tell you, it's just like a car. It's like when they had that blackout here in New York. And everyone was looking in the car to anything that had wheels, as long as they didn't stop to see whether it was a Mercedes-Benz, a Cadillac, a Buick. They wanted to know, you're going to when they had that big, remember they had that big blackout?
Yeah.
Well, I looked the same way. Look, at that time, if it was a good drum set, I didn't care what kind it was. But to bring my point across, Gene Krupa was still on the board of directors with Slingland Drum Companies. That's what the scene was.
Yeah.
And they were looking for guys to advertise for the company.
Right.
And he told me, and I said, "Look, man," he says, "Man, I like that drummer, says, Bud Slingland says he's looking for guys, you know what I mean, to advertise, and says he wants to get, guys, that can play and they're exciting or whatever, and he says he'll get, set every year, and, he'll take pictures and blah, blah." Says, and
wow.
When Maynard came to me and said to me, especially with me, I came down and I had this little rattle traps, you know what I mean, that I bought from Buffalo, I had just been in New York. And when he says, "Hey," he says, "Gene Krupa's over there," says, "He want to talk to you." He likes the way you play. He says, "Hey, you think you can deal with a set of slinging drums?" That did me more good. And, for the first place, for him to say to me, when I went over there, for him put out, says, "Hey, I think you're great, you play great." For him to say that to me, because I would have never expected that. In other words, how you, as a kid, sure. It's like I just told you the story, I skipped school, I seen him there on the stage, then going through, and they're playing all the things, Leave Asleep, and I think Roy Eldridge was still with them, and Nito Day, and I'd see him, they turned the lights down low, and I thought, my God, if I ever get, and for him to say that to me, plus say, "I want you to advertise with Slingland," I think that was the biggest turning point, for me, because the compliment was great, and the fact that I'm going to get a set and going to advertise for Slingland, which I needed, because I could have never continued to play with Maynard on the rattle traps that I was playing. No drums? Well, no, I won't say anything. I won't mention the name of the drums that I was playing, but it was just a old set.
Yeah.
That was broken down, and you know what I mean. And I'm not going to put the company down at the time. It's just that particular set I bought from Buffalo, and I was in market for a new set. That's what it was. Yeah. So look, if it had been any kind of drums, it didn't have to be Slingland. As soon as it's like somebody, you go out there, it's like you on one of those quiz programs, Bob Barker or whatever, and they say, "Hey, and look here, if you want to show you what's behind that, you're going to get a new car." And it's a new, whatever he says, a new Pontiac, a new Cadillac. You're going to get a new BMW. Everybody says, "Oh," they never say, "No, I won't drive a Pontiac. I won't drive a Dodge. I can't do it." If they tell you we got the keys, what do? Everybody, when they win it. So that's the way, I felt about this. I'm going to tell you, I don't give a doggone what kind of set
Mm-hmm.
that anyone would have told me, look, we have it new, it could have been any kind, but it happened, it was Slingland, and I advertised for the, well, I stayed with Maynard for about close to 3 years,
Yeah.
and I advertised for Slingland.
I've got copies of those ads still. I've got the old downbeats with the.
Oh yeah,
Slingland.
with
Do
the
you have any of
sling.
those? Do you have
Yeah, I still got the and
Yeah.
also Zildjian and I, went to advertise, for the Zildjian symbols and that bit. But that was the early, that was those early exciting days, of my career.
Good transition period going into bop, and stuff. Now, Mel said you thought you studied with Max Roach for a while?
When I came down, I came down to New York. Well, I'm going to tell you, the first time why Mel Lewis said that is because he took my place when I came down the first time.
Yeah.
To see Max, and I stayed over. Max Roach was staying on Green Street in Brooklyn at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact that was the first time that Max had. At that time, I think he had married his first marriage, which I don't think lasted too long. But anyhow, I was also, like I have a dedication to Max because he also, took me under his wings.
Yeah.
Like, to answer your question, Max came to Buffalo with Charlie Parker, and Max didn't have a bass drum
Right.
at the time, and they were looking, and the secretary of the union was calling all around. So, to make a long story short, they got a hold of me, and I happened to have two,
Mm-hmm.
bass drums at the time. But anyhow, I loaned Max my bass drum, and he told me, come down to the Memorial Auditorium. He says, and as soon as the job is over, he says, I'll give you your drum back, and I loaned him my drum. Now, 2 years, well, I said 2 years or one, I don't know, 1 or 2 years after that was when I come down to New York, and Max was in 52nd Street, and I went down, and he remembered me. That made me feel so good too, because he's just like Krupa. He's
Yeah.
another one that, that I, had great admiration for,
Yep.
and who, I had influenced me. And he took me over to Brooklyn. My first night in New York, and he was playing at the Three Deuces and that's Miles Davis. It was Charlie Parker,
Tommy
Miles
Potter.
Davis, Tommy Potter, right,
Yeah.
and Duke Jordan.
Jordan.
That was the group.
Yeah.
And Ella Fitzgerald was across the street at Kelly's Stables.
Yeah.
you know 52nd Street, So anyhow, Max, he remembered the first thing he remembered, because as far as my playing was concerned, he had never heard me play.
Yeah.
All he knew was that I was a drummer. I loaned him my drum in Buffalo.
Right.
And he came out of the place and he saw me. Hey, he said, "How you doing?" And
Yeah.
he couldn't even think of my name then. I had to tell him,
Yeah.
my name. He said, "Yeah, Buffalo." He says, "Oh man," he says, "you did me great favor, man." He says, "Look, well, what do you?" He says, "Come hang out with me." He says, and he says, "Come." He said, "What?" He said, "Look, he says, come and stay." He says, "Come on." He says, where you?" I says, "Well, I'm staying with my cousin, now." He says, it wasn't I didn't have a place to stay.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh man," he says, he knew it was my first time in New York. He
Yeah.
knew, and I went over to Brooklyn, stayed over his house 3 days,
Wow.
and he got the drums out. Like I said, he had never heard me play,
Yeah.
and he got a practice pad, and he started to, do a few things, and I started to do single stroke rolls and double strokes, and he used to see, and he was like correcting me on my hands, showing me how to get more power, but to answer your question again, it wasn't a thing where I stayed in New York and I actually studied
Okay.
with him, but he just, he
Showed
gave
you
me
some stuff,
showed me some stuff that helped me
Yeah.
in coordination.
Okay.
And the one who really showed me the key to doing all of the coordination was Johnny Rowland from the Buffalo Symphony, who, like I say, if you were to ask, like a 1,000 drummers starting out, and they'd say, well, you're going to be taught by Joe Blow, you're going to be taught by him, or who you're going to be taught, look, Johnny Rowland's teaching from the Buffalo Symphony. They'd say, oh man, no, not symphony, because I can't get what I want out of a cat playing a symphony.
Right.
I'm a jazz man.
Yeah.
But that's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
I learned more about coordination from Johnny Rowland, who the average drummer, even in Buffalo at that time, says, hey, Frankie, who you studying with? And I said, I'm studying with Johnny Rowland, Buffalo Symphony. He said, oh man, I think I'll wait till later. He showed me the like I said, he showed me all of the intricate things and the kingpin, lessons, that would lead me into coordination, how to have that, as they say, that independence from one hand. In other words, to play the modern, the stuff that the guys were doing in the modern, he was the one. He showed me how to do it, and it was a simple thing, because he had me to hit both. He told me, he says, look, you do this, Frank, if you're riding on a streetcar, whether you're walking, if you're going to a movie, to a restaurant, and he says, you just hit both hands together. Well, he wrote it down too, a little lesson. But he says it's something that really you don't even have to write down that much. He says you just hit both hands together like this. He says, now, okay, you're using this hand for your symbol. And he says hit both hands and just go. He says you wouldn't think that this would give it to you, but look. And he says. He's going, and now that's slow, and you wouldn't think that this was the triplet over there. Blah, 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 da, 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 da. And when it would get faster, he says, and then you do it like that the first day, so then put a little more speed. Da, 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 da.
You got the right symbol thing on, yeah.
And he said, then you get with the left hand, and before you know it, you do it for the bass, So boom, 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 and I, simple. And after I kept, doing this, then it came to me. This is what Persip and Shaughnessy was doing with the
bass drum.
Yeah, and then later on they go. Because actually now, a lot of people don't realize the fact, especially drummers, although he turned out to be, look, Skin Deep was one of the greatest solos. Believe me, I mean for the technique of it, but it wasn't really Belson. Ed Shaughnessy was really the first
to use two bass drums.
He was. Yeah. But you see, he wasn't the one who got the credit or the one who's the most popular, because Louis Belson, Skin Deep with Duke Ellington, that just pushed Louis Belson, pushed him right across the board. And like I'm saying, and I do know Ed Shaughnessy is not the technician that Belson is, but he was the first to get up there with Charlie Ventura, with them two, and then after him it was Charlie Persip came a little long there, but really it was Ed Shaughnessy. Yeah. He had the two bass drums before
Belson. I've heard that before. Yeah.
Sure, it's the truth. But he doesn't get the credit. He don't get the credit for it. But
let me hit the paddle room.
Yeah, good. Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah. Can I get you anything else? Well,
no. Look, hey, you had told me about the and evidently you were really lending an ear around the time that around the Monk time, because you tell me about the 2 Hours with Monk album.
I forget how many Monk albums I have, but a ton of them. So yeah, it just I don't know what it was about Monk, but I'll tell you the first guy that ever made jazz click for me. Okay, well, Krupa, I always liked him. Right?
Yeah.
But then there was a time with modern jazz where
Yeah.
I had been listening to blues records, and I liked blues, but there's something about jazz.
Yeah.
I just, I didn't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about the artist. I said, let me go to the Newport Jazz Festival.
Yeah, right.
All right. So we went, and it was the last time they had it in Newport, Rhode Island. In the 70s, they had riots and stuff. But I got to see the first day.
Yeah.
So who came out? Willie the Lion Smith.
Yeah.
And some other piano player, like U.B. Blake.
U.B. Blake, yeah.
Okay. And then Charlie Mingus came out.
Oh.
And I can still remember this tune that Mingus was playing. I'm trying to think of the piano player's name. He's dead now. Played with Joe something, maybe?
Oh, wait a minute.
Not a real famous piano, not like Jackie Byard or one of those guys, but it was...
Well, it wasn't Joe Albany. It wasn't Joe Albany.
No.
His name is Joe, huh?
Maybe. I forget. Anyway, they're playing this tune, and all of a sudden, he started playing this little riff in the high register of the piano, and it was just like, dong, a light goes on. And, and that was the instant that for some reason I understood what the heck was going on in jazz. And from then on, I worked in record stores. We used to do great, man. Get all the prestige records and Blue Notes and
because that was the time, because you got that. See, that evidently that must have been re-released. Well, it didn't have to be because
this was an old.
You could have gotten the original. I'm just saying, but I do know they reissued. That set of 2 hours with Monk.
It was a good album.
Because that was the Monk. That was his first European tour that I went with him, like in '61. Doing that, right. 61, 63. That was time now.
Okay, well, before we get to, I want to stick with Maynard. How'd you do that? How'd you get the gig with Maynard?
How did I get the job with Maynard? Well, I'm going to tell you. Maynard Ferguson. I knew Maynard Ferguson from Buffalo. Maynard knew of me from Buffalo through Mo Kaufman.
Mm-hmm. What do I know that?
Well, that's Mo Kaufman from Toronto. Remember Swinging the Shepherd Blues?
Yes. Okay.
That's where probably where you're getting the message. Yeah, from there. And Mo Kaufman. Yeah. Well, anyhow, actually Maynard, he knew me before then, but I didn't have any big band experience that I had. I think I was, I guess Maynard and I, we're about the same age, but Maynard had a band over at the Crystal Beach, a park playing band, and I think there was 5 cents or 10 cents a dance over at,
really?
At Crystal Beach. Yeah. Now Maynard had a big band when he was around 14 and 15, and now he's from Montreal, right. Originally, and but he played in the Crystal Beach. Well, that was
Buffalo.
Well, no, you might as well say Buffalo because it was about 70 miles from Buffalo, but you'd have to go through the Canada. See, Buffalo and Canada, it's on the border of Canada, and Crystal Beach was like you'd figure 60, 70 miles away, and it was a beach where people from Buffalo or Rochester, they would go as a entertainment, a park just like Coney Island is here to New York. And Maynard was 15 years old and he had a large band playing. They called him the Harry James of Canada. See, that's what they called him at the time. And he was 15. He had this band, and he used to come up to the Musicians Club, to the Musicians Club in Buffalo. At the time, there were 2 locals at that time. Of course, now it's all united, but at the first it was the black musicians. Well, at that time it was the colored musicians and the white musicians, and there was a club. The colored musicians had a club where they would have open jam sessions every week, and everyone was invited. People come from all over, and every Sunday, and so I met Maynard.
One of the jams?
In one of the sessions.
Yeah.
And he had asked me then. He says, "Do you ever come to Crystal Beach?" He says, "Cause we sit there and we talk and we rap." He says, and he's over there at Crystal Beach, and he says, "Come over," because Maynard had heard me play up there at the club. He says, "Come over," and he says, and catch the band. He says, "Have you ever been interested in big band work?" And I'm straight a big band. Well, at that time I had no experience at all.
Could you read?
And I had very little experience with reading too at that time, outside of the reading that I did in the march. See, I was playing in the musicians, as they call a concert band at the local.
Okay.
Where they would have basically, just say march unit
Snare
songs,
drum parts
snare
and stuff.
drums, playing that type of stuff. Which was good for the eyes. I got my early experience, early reading experience I got from playing in the concert band there at the Union.
Yeah.
And then after I went to study with Johnny Rowland, that sort of stretched my knowledge more into the reading until the Army got me. I probably would have been with Johnny Rowland. Hell, if the Army hadn't have drafted me, I'd probably be playing hell with Leonard Bernstein or something. I mean, I'd have that kind of I would have that knowledge to be able to go in and to hold down, the Boston Symphony or any, I would be just that finish on the whole percussion. What I'm saying, the whole scene, whether it was from
anything,
symphony, anything, Yeah. And because I was studying with the percussionists of Buffalo, he would have taken me all the way. I look, the Army, although I know that, heck, I'm not alone, in the bag of people who have gone over, the guys who drafted, but really, I was really, I had, as they say, daggers in my eyes with Uncle Sam for taking me away from my studies of my music.
Korean War?
Yeah, that was right. It was. Which was supposed to be a police action, because I was right in the midst of my studying. And Johnny Rowland even told me, says, "Hey," he says, "Frank, I'll carry you all the way because says he had said, you have it. I can see how enthused you, how enthused you are. I think basically because I kept knowing on him about, look, give me that, show me how those guys play that little thing." And I was more concerned about that. He said, "Don't worry, we'll get to that, Frank." I was just about to think, I said, "Oh, he don't know. He's telling me that, and he don't really know what that little thing is to get that chord." That's what I was more concerned about. But as I'm saying that, I feel as though I would have, gone, all the way down, to if I hadn't have been drafted,
Did you play in the Army at all?
I played in the Army.
You did?
I did play in the Army. I played the Fort Dix. I played the drill. When going out in basic training. When I guess they saw on my records. I was a musician, although I didn't get really situated into a musical aggregation until I got overseas. The last place that I had expected to get my, myself, affiliated with some music. In other words, I had it all down about I was a musician and I blah blah blah. I got a anti-aircraftsman's MOS. And just like, anything else, you go into the service, even in Fort Dix at that time, all the guys who got into that band, they got into that band from knowing somebody, knowing the right people.
Yeah.
To fill out the application and say, "I'm a musician," that does, as you know yourself, hey, you got 1,000, thousands and thousands that'll come in and say, "I'm this, I'm a..." Well, okay, so you are. I'm not saying that you won't, get, but for the first place, they used to have the test, and I think that's what the guys that would get into the band, they give them, say, you're going to go down, you're going to see the warrant officer of the band, he's going to give you a test, and when there's an opening, you'll get in, which
Right.
was that was the same story that was given to everyone, because there's so many guys come and say, hey, I want to get in the band, it's special service.
Right.
In other words, you just didn't come in there and say, hey, I'm a musician or whatever, or I'm in show business, or I'm this or whatever, and you go into special service. So what happened with me, I did 8 weeks of basic training. Well, I had 14 weeks in Fort Dix. And, excuse me. What really got me was the fact that I'm there in basic training, 14 weeks. I'm in Battery A. Right next door to me is Battery B. And on Monday night, now, well, I'm a little ahead of my story. Nelson Boyd, the bass player.
Yeah.
I know you remember him and at that time, he was, playing with Max Roach
Right.
and J.J. Johnson, and he was recording, around New York with, all the Savoy and the New Jazz label. He's taking training, basic training like I am.
Mm-hmm.
But on Monday nights, I turn on the radio right over in New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, when the cadre man is saying, okay, fall in, okay, attention, Nelson Boyd is right there next to me. But yet and still, on Monday, here's Symphony Sid comes on. Okay, so Symphony Sid, and I want to tell you, we've got a crazy lineup here. We got some swinging cats. We got J.J. Johnson on trombone, and we got my man Sonny Stitz is on. Yeah, he's going to play some alto and a little tenor. And we got my man here, Max Roach on drums, and we got a real cooking bass man, Nelson Boyd. And I said, wait a minute.
How's he doing?
How is he doing this? How is he in basic training? So I'm saying all that, Scott, to say that Nelson Boyd knew somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there trying, I'm up there going every day. I'm taking my handkerchief to the chaplain, crying on the chaplain's shoulders. Look, I sure would like to get a trial for the band. I would like to look. I mean, I'm not saying look at Nelson. I'm not saying he's doing, but I'm trying to figure out. Nelson Boyd he's in the band,
right,
marching, and he's in basic training. He's in. What I'm saying, he's still in his basic training, and on our past day, like on the weekend, I look up, and when the band is marching down with them 75 musicians in Fort Dix and the warrant officers in the front, I look there, but Nelson Boyd isn't playing bass; he's playing the tuba, or the bass horn, whatever.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
Like a lot of bass players can play. Can play the the bass horn.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, wait a minute, what is this? Nelson Boyd, when I shipped out and went to Fort Bliss to anti-aircraft training, Nelson Boyd stayed there, right there in Fort Dix.
Yeah.
Every Monday, I would turn on the radio when they have the Monday night jam session at Birdland. Nelson Boyd played three Mondays out of 4 weeks. He played 3 of the Mondays, and I'm still trying to figure out how the heck did he get. Monday isn't a past day, but this, I'm saying, Scott, this shows you what the situation is. Who do you know?
You ever figured out how he
I
did
haven't figured out. It says, I know it say what you know, but look, in the case is, it's not about, like a lot of times, of what, well, with him, he delivers.
Yeah.
But he also, with delivering, I believe that either the warrant officer in the band, they knew he was coming. He knew either the warrant officer, someone, put all of the right, you understand, all of the right language that was needed in his behalf.
Mm-hmm.
He had gotten it from somebody, because nowhere in the world could he be in Birdland. Because you see, I could hear New York City from the radio.
Yeah.
It's right across the river.
Yeah.
And that's when the Symphony Sid show was.
Maybe the warrant officer like Symphony Sid or something,
Well, it could be, but you see what happened now. To continue my story about in my Army career, you asked me about the Army playing. I had cried on so many shoulders there, and I was determined. And I was going to. What I do, I go to the service club. and there's a piano player that was there, and I'd get up, and it was a little, it wasn't a, you know, a real professional set, but just a little raggedy, and I would beat, I'd go, I was going to make something. I said, my God, I got to show these people. I want to play. I'd like to be in the band, you know, because, excuse me, you know, I'm at that age where, okay, like I say, I'm right in the midst of Johnny Rollins. I mean, he's got me right at the point there. He's shown me these different things. I'm beginning to, I was taking my lessons from the Charles Wilcoxon book,
Good books.
Rolling in Rhythm.
Yeah.
I had all that stuff down, man, and he would, every time Johnny Rollins would say, "Oh, Frank, you're doing good. Just keep that. Go over this. Keep that." You know, I was almost all the way through the book, you know, playing, and that, in other words, the Army took me right when I was so inspired and was doing so good with my lessons.
Yeah.
So it's a thing where, you know, it's like a break off in your life. So I'm saying I got, even though I was in the Army or had to take basic training, I was drafted, which I knew, and I knew to try to do my best. I knew I was there and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to make the best out of it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I didn't have the kind of attitude of going AWOL or, you know what I mean, saying I'm going to bust out of it because I felt so bad about going.
Yeah.
I'm saying, while I'm here, the best thing I can do is try to make the best out of the Army, and try to make the connections or to show my talents, let my talents work in here, because I'm going to be here for 18 months.
Yeah.
And I went to the service club, and the service club would call. In other words, when they have someone coming over, like some officers would come from some other camp and come in, and we would go over and play, and it got to be, you know, like a thing where they were looking forward to me and these other two musicians, you know, playing. So I'd go over, but what I really wanted, that warrant officer of the Fort Dix band, he never came in. I'm saying, you know, the thing is, I couldn't get any understanding from nobody. In other words, it was like, wait a minute, until you get this basic training, this is what's more important right now. This is what this is psychology that every